Hi, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for the Empowering You Let's Talk Recovery program. We're going to talk a little bit today about team use and what it takes to get yourselves back on the path of recovery. So to start, my name is Ms. Hoglin. I'm a school counselor and student assistance coordinator at Ewing High School.
And I'm Jocelyn Cooper. I'm the executive director of the Mercer Council on Alcoholism and Drug Addiction. I am a mental health and substance use disorder counselor, and I'm so happy to be here with Ms. Hoglin talking to you about this topic. So let's go ahead and jump right in.
All right, so to start, I'm just going to review some of our objectives today. We are going to review brain science related to substance use, some challenges and consequences associated as well. Risk and protective factors, signs and symptoms of alcohol and drug use, reasons that youth actually start using substances, prevention methods, stigma, and of course, available resources.
So we're going to get started by testing your knowledge a little bit. These questions are generated through NIDA, which is the National Institute on Drug Abuse, and we're going to have a few of them dispersed throughout the presentation. So our first question to check your knowledge is, research shows that young people's brains keep developing well into their 20s. What effect could alcohol have on the development of the brain? A, cause cognitive or learning problems. B, affect brain structure and function. C, sharpen your cognitive function. D, none of the above. E, A and B, or F, all of the above. So we'll give a second just for you to make your guesses. And the answer is E, both A and B, cause cognitive or learning problems and affect the structure and function of the brain. So as Ms. Hoglin said, there is the brain science behind addiction, which we are going to go over. So many of you might know that the brain continues to actually develop until 25 or older. And so this is some of the reason why alcohol, for example, has an age of 21 as legal, because we want teens' brains to fully develop or continue to develop further until they introduce chemicals into the brain. So drugs such as alcohol, opioids, marijuana are all chemicals that can cause changes to the structure of the brain. And this has serious implications before it is fully developed. And we'll learn about what some of those are as we progress through the presentation. Drugs actually work two different ways in the brain. So one of the ways that they work is by imitating the brain's natural chemical messengers or overstimulating or flooding the reward circuit of the brain. So introducing a ton of feel-good chemicals all at once to create sort of a euphoric state, which makes substances sometimes feel really good for people who are doing them. The way our brains work is our brains are really wired to repeat activities that we connect with health and feeling good. So for example, we enjoy food, and so our brains connect eating food with feeling good because it's healthy for us. And so unfortunately, alcohol and other drugs target the same reward circuits and the same brain processes that we associate with rewards and feeling good. Eventually what happens though, the brain starts to adjust to the surges in chemicals in the brain, and it often can stop producing those natural chemicals such as dopamine and serotonin. And so what ends up happening is that people have the reduced ability to feel pleasure because their brains don't make those chemicals on their own anymore. And so that can cause a person to feel sort of flat and lifeless, to lose interest in things that they once enjoyed. And often people move in the addictive process from wanting to feel good by getting high to needing to use to feel normal. The good news is the brain can adjust and relearn to create those chemicals again on its own, but it does sometimes take some time once a person stops using substances. And so the Monitoring the Future survey is something that is done by the National Institute of Drug Abuse. And you can go to this resource to see the current trends in substance use for youth in 8th, 10th, and 12th grade. Some of the interesting facts here and some of the substances that the Monitoring the Future survey chose to focus on in 2019 were vaping, alcohol, and marijuana. And just a fun fact here about marijuana, in the 2020 publishing, which was for 2019, 65% of 12th grade students did not use marijuana in the past year. 72% of 10th grade students did not use marijuana in the past year. And 89% of 8th grade students did not use marijuana in the past year. And so while sometimes youth really feel like these kinds of things are going on very frequently and all their friends are doing it, it's portrayed sometimes on social media and by the media, or, is something that's sort of portrayed to fit in and, be popular or be cool. The research actually shows that the majority of teens, for example, are not using marijuana.
Okay, and while we went over some of the consequences on the brain for using substances, of course, we know that there are other consequences on your organs and on the body. I'm going to review some of these social consequences that you face when you do get tangled up in substance and alcohol use. So the first being distorted social and emotional development, discord in relationships, right? So if you're under the influence, you're more likely to get into arguments, to misunderstand what people are saying. Of course, other discord in relationships like family members, significant others who do not agree with your use, that typically ends up in causing fights. Substance-related fatalities, right? Overdose is probably the biggest one that does come to mind. Sexual activity and risky sexual behavior, right? We have lower inhibitions, our judgment is off. We may not know or be able to consent at the time and get ourselves involved in situations that we shouldn't be in or that we don't want to be in. Academic and school challenges, again, when we're damaging our brain and we're impairing our memory, it's going to be really hard to focus on your schoolwork and to be productive and do well. Substance use disorders, right? So that recreational use quickly turns into a substance use disorder that you will need to get treatment for. You do need to take steps to mediate. Victims of violent crime. So this is, being in the wrong place at the wrong time, getting yourself mixed up in the wrong crowds related to illegal activities, of course. Mental health challenges. So some side effects of alcohol and marijuana use are actually producing anxiety. So that could be a mental health challenge that you wouldn't typically have to face and maybe counterproductive to what you're trying to do by easing your stress or anxiety. And it could be very severe. For example, marijuana use can actually trigger schizophrenia and psychosis if it's something that you were prone to having. So very dangerous there. Of course, poor judgment, right? Those lowered inhibitions, we're not making good choices. It can cause memory impairments. You start to partake in risk-taking behaviors. And so I don't typically get into like the gateway drug discussion, but I think when you start taking risks by using substances, using them in different places, using them in higher quantities, and if you think that you're not experiencing any negative effects, you may be likely to take bigger and greater risks to the point where down the road, you may find yourself engaging in activities that you thought you never would, like drinking or smoking and being under the influence while driving, which of course leads us to the next one. Traffic or other accidents is a main consequence, and crime or violent crime. Again, being mixed up with the wrong people. You may be hanging out with people who end up engaging in a crime that you did not intend to, or you yourself may become so desperate to get those substances that you're willing to do whatever it takes, could even be stealing from family members.
Yeah, and a lot of times, along with people having mental health challenges as a result of their substance use, sometimes, like you said, people are using substances to manage a mental health related challenge, but it's really more of a band-aid, right? Underneath it all, the mental health related challenge is still there because these substances are only sort of a temporary fix to escape from the problem maybe in that moment, but can end up really piling a lot of things on top of it. So in terms of risk factors, there are some known risk factors that make people more susceptible to substance use. Some of those include early age of first use. So the younger a person uses, the more at risk they are for substance related challenges and, a potential substance use disorder. Another risk factor is an individual's belief that others think that substance use is okay. So, if I think that my family, friends, community has positive attitudes, or maybe just doesn't have negative attitudes towards substances, then I may also have that belief as well. Involvement with peers who engage in risky health behaviors, family members, caregivers, loved ones, friends who have a perception of use that is positive, or having a perception that loved ones and friends are using substances. So that sort of goes back to when we talk about marijuana. We may have the perception that a lot of our friends and family, or specifically friends, are using marijuana, but the research actually shows that a lot of our friends are not. But just having the perception that they are can sometimes be a risk factor. Having mental health related challenges, either individually or having mental health related challenges present in the family, being someone who has experienced trauma. So we know that trauma can cause a lot of challenges down the road, and people can turn to substances as a way to cope with that. Having a belief that drugs are not harmful, or maybe specifically that a certain drug is not harmful, and we see this a lot with marijuana. So for example, marijuana is safe because it's natural, because it's medicine, because it's now legal. And so I now believe that this substance is not harmful. And so because it's not harmful, I may be more likely to use it. What we do know about marijuana is that it has so many different chemicals in it. And because the THC content is so much higher than it used to be in the past, it can cause negative reactions associated with the high psychoactive properties of it. And it can be addictive. And also we know that when substances are readily available and accessible, that they're more easily, obtained and used by youth.
Okay, so going over some protective factors, of course, they're going to be mostly the opposite of what the risk factors are. So prolonging your first use of substances is certainly going to help. You're giving yourself the time for your brain to really fully develop. The earlier you use, the more likely you are to go on and have a substance use disorder. Now, that's not to say that you can't become an alcoholic at age 45, because there are certainly cases where that does happen, but preventing or delaying the age of onset is a protective factor. Believing that your family and friends disapprove of drug use, having positive school achievement and connection. So it is really important to have that connection with your school, to care about your schoolwork and your future. And if you are invested in those things, you are less likely to, go off and use substances, which can damage your schoolwork and your achievement. Being somebody who is focused on wellness and well-being is a protective factor, right? You are prioritizing your health physically and mentally. You are exercising, you are eating the right things, and you are taking care of yourself. Somebody who is very conscious of that is a lot less likely to introduce foreign substances into their body that they don't know what the outcome could be. Access to services and resources. Of course, this is helpful because then you can certainly get the help exactly when you need it. So it is just important to know where those services and those resources are and how to access them so you can use them the second that you need them. The belief that substance use is harmful to the brain and body. And this really comes onto you guys. You need to educate yourselves. You need to know what you're putting in your body, what is good for you, what is not good for you, right? It's just like trying to come up with a diet. You're going to want to know what the composition of the foods are, how many calories. It's the same thing. You need to know what the substances that you are intaking, what they're made up of, and what they could do to your body. Having limited accessibility and availability, of course, is a protective factor. So keep yourself away from places where you know that other kids or teens are using. Stay away from the people who are involved in substance use, are selling substances, those types of things. Just try to distance yourself as much as possible. That also takes away from the temptation and the peer pressure. Having strong relationships with family and family cohesion. It doesn't have to be a parent, it doesn't have to be your immediate family, but it is important that you have at least one trusted and respected adult in your life that you can turn to if you really are struggling. So try to identify that person, because if you need them, you know exactly who to go to. And of course, prevention and early intervention. If you find yourself slipping, if you find yourself becoming curious, early intervention is definitely your biggest protective factor, to try to get help as early as possible. Part of the reason that I do this work with teens is because I have seen adults really in the throes of their addiction, really deep into their mental health issues. And the longer that it goes on, the more difficult it is to get out of. So early intervention is extremely, extremely important. Get yourself the help now before you find yourself doing things and engaging in activities that you really never thought that you would.
And Paige, that is such a great point too about the early intervention, and same thing with prevention. So educational, events like this, different trainings, things that we can try to do to either prevent substance use altogether by giving people the knowledge and skills that they need to avoid it, or by delaying the onset of it so we can reduce the likelihood of a substance use disorder. And I think it's also important to acknowledge here that each of us have individual risk and protective factors from our immediate situations, our biology, our surroundings, our families, but there also are societal factors that contribute to this as well. So systemic issues that make, lack of care inaccessible, or, that have created certain environments, for certain communities that are have been historically oppressed or marginalized. And so there are ways in prevention and early intervention to also advocate sort of at a more global level to ensure that we create equitable conditions for everyone as well.
Exactly. And just to piggyback on that, I do just want to commend everybody that is here, that is listening right now. It is super important that you are here and you're learning. Yeah. Um, and, we're not doing this because we have to. We're not doing this because we just, want everyone to say no to drugs. We're really trying to educate everyone because we care, because we have seen firsthand how scary this can be. And, we have seen rock bottoms for other individuals, and we really don't want to see this being perpetuated in our communities. So thank you guys for being here, and we really just hope that you take something from this. So anyway, to test your knowledge, question number 2, which drug do adolescents use the most? Do we think it's alcohol, marijuana, nicotine, such as vaping, or none of the above? So think about that for a second. All right. And the answer is alcohol. So when we think about drugs, usually we think about heroin or even marijuana, but really the most prevalent drug is alcohol, and it is a silent killer. So it is important to recognize that, yes, while it's legal and while adults may use it in moderation, it is something that adolescents are using the most, and it is not, a place where we really do need to put our prevention efforts. Okay. So let's talk a little bit about why do youth use? And I'm sure for any of you sitting here watching this presentation, you can come up with plenty of different reasons, or excuses why you've heard friends, family members, whomever use substances. So some of the reasons may be to fit in because of peer pressure. We don't know how to say no when we're asked, maybe just for boredom or to have fun, to reduce stress or escape, maybe just even escape our thoughts, to cure a physiological issue, whether that be to help with sleep, to cure pain, something of that nature, or to feel more confident or to boost our performance, whatever it is that we think the substance is going to do for us. And the reason we want to identify why do youth use is because we need to find the root cause in order to find the solutions, right? So we need to know what is the underlying reason, what is the motivator that is getting me to use, And if I can figure that out, we can start to look at how do we find healthy alternatives and how do we really get to the root of the problem. So on the next slide, here we have effective solutions. So of course, there are a million different solutions to any of these problems, but I want to just offer some suggestions to some of them. All right. It is a lot here, so just hear me out. But okay, so let's say we're using for boredom or because we want to have fun. There are plenty of solutions to this issue, right? Create a daily schedule to stay busy. Schedule yourself in activities constantly. Another reason that academic performance and involvement in the school is a protective factor because you are staying busy. Prioritize your responsibilities like homework, chores, and exercise. Have you ever told a parent that I'm bored, what should I do today? And they come back and say, well, I can find a ton of things for you to do. The bathroom needs to be clean, you could take the garbage out, right? So all these different things. And if you prioritize your responsibilities, it's likely that you'll find a lot of things that you can do to cure some of that boredom. You can start a new hobby. This will not only be fun, but it also creates that sense of mastery and it helps boost your confidence and your self-esteem because you are learning new things and starting to become proficient in new activities. And of course, call or visit someone who does not use drugs or alcohol, right? So let's lean on our social supports. Who can I hang out with? Who can I talk to right now to keep me entertained and just pass the time? Okay, so to reduce stress or to escape. So if that's your reason for using, I encourage you to vent to someone you trust about your stressors. It's a great way to get rid of your stress. Try some deep breathing or meditation if you are harboring some anxiety. As we mentioned, that substance use can actually cause anxiety. So it really isn't an effective solution to try to cure something like that. Listen to upbeat music. If you are feeling stressed, you're feeling sad, depressed, whatever the reason may be, and if you're the type of person who is interested in music, you know that you cannot be sad or down when you're listening to those feel good songs. So definitely use that. It is a coping skill that many of you probably are already doing. And get into a good book, show, or movie. If you feel that you have a lot of mental background noise, that you're ruminating on an issue or a problem, if you can get yourself into a good book or a good movie and you focus your attention on something, it's also called mindfulness, then you'll see that all that background noise starts to fade away because your attention is focused elsewhere. Okay, so using to feel more confident, whether that be, in some sort of sport or activity or just within yourself, practice your skills to gain confidence. If you feel that you perform better under the influence, if you would just practice your skills, then you would actually gain the confidence organically, all while getting better. Spend time with people who are positive and appreciate you. A lot of time, our lack of confidence comes from the comments that others are making to us, and we start to internalize it. So really focus on being around people who are positive. And another thing you can do is practice affirmations and self-talk. Now that's a lot easier said than done. You may also find that using the help of a counselor is helpful, but self-talk, negative self-talk usually is a habit that's formed over time from just constant negativity, whether that be from yourself or hearing it from other people. So really it's a matter of trying to switch that habit around and how to identify the negative self-talk and reframe it with something more positive. Okay, moving on to curing a physiological problem. If this is your reason for using, let's say, oh, it's the only way that I can get to sleep at night. There are a lot of things you can do to adjust your sleep schedule and your nighttime routine that will help with sleep. And it will be effective without having to rely on a substance because let's be real, it's not going to be an effective solution for a long time and maybe not every time. If you are using to try to cure pain, go see a doctor for medical concerns or pain management. There are things out there that you can do. And if taking other medications is not something you're interested in, you may want to try holistic approaches like yoga or stretching. And there are other things you can do. And for any other physiological problem, I'm sure you've heard this before, but diet and exercise are always, the best things for you and for your body. And lastly, if you're using to fit in or just because of peer pressure and your friend group, learn ways to say no. This is really important. This is kind of like step number one. And so we'll go into that a little bit further next. But also avoid spending time with people who pressure you. They obviously don't care about your best interests. So try to spend more time with people who actually care about what you want. And if you're not interested in using substances, then they should totally respect that. So really looking at the people you're surrounding yourself with, and also investing time in things that you value, because you're going to feel a lot better about yourself and your self-worth if you are spending time in things that you care about, rather than just looking to please other people. And lastly, most importantly, an effective solution would be seeking professional counseling. Okay. A counselor can help you with any of these problems and more. So if it's just getting over substance use, they can help you with that. If you can recognize some of the underlying causes, a counselor can certainly help you with that as well. And we'll go over a little bit later, how can you get yourself a counselor if you're interested. All right, so let's dive into a little bit about ways to say no. Like I said, this is kind of the first thing and the most important thing to keep yourself safe. Um, so you want to come up with a plan of action and know what you're going to say ahead of time. Because let's say somebody calls you up on the phone and asks, or you walk into a party and somebody asks you right away, having this excuse in your back pocket makes a lot easier, and you don't get caught in like, oh no, what do I say? So I'll give you some examples and maybe you want to choose one of those. But once you come up with a reason to say no, and if you have, the belief that I really don't want to get into this for whatever reason it may be, it's a great decision, and I want you to stay strong in your decision. So if somebody continues to ask you, continues to try to pressure you or make fun of you and tease you, you need to be firm in that decision and just be assured of yourself that you have made the right choice, and the person who is continuing to try to ask you is really not being respectful at this time. If you can leave the situation, leave the situation. If you can avoid spending time with people who are using substances, that's also a great way to just get yourself out of it. But also recognize that if somebody does not respect your boundaries, then they are not somebody that you want to be around. They can't respect that you don't want to put harmful chemicals into your body. They're probably not respecting you on a lot of different fronts. So that's something to be mindful of. And if somebody's really pushing it, it's probably because they don't really feel comfortable with using themselves, and they're trying to recruit other people around them to also use and feel a little bit more comfortable, right? They know that this is something I shouldn't be doing, and it would be really frowned upon if I'm doing it by myself. So I'm going to just try to manipulate people around me to also join in so I feel less guilty about myself. And you know what? That's not your job to help people feel less guilty about their poor decisions. Okay? So it is something that you can stay confident in. So ways to say no, you can blame outside factors. My parents. My parents would take away my car if I got caught. It's not worth it. I need to be able to pass a drug test for work or for sports. And the work one really is important, for any of you, if you do have a job or if you've gotten a job, a lot of times you do need to pass a drug test in order to get that job or to keep that job. You can make a joke of it if you're more comfortable with humor. Say something like, do I look like somebody that can handle that? I'd be on my butt somewhere. No thanks. You can use facts like, I heard that damages your memory. I heard that can cause mental health issues, and I really just don't want any of those issues. I don't want to risk it. Or there's a history of addiction in my family and I can't risk it. That's a huge one. And it is important to talk with your family members. Is there a history of addiction in my family? Because you are at such a greater risk to become an addict yourself. And so that is really not something to mess with. And I think for the most part, that's something other people will respect as well. And some other ones, last time I used, it didn't end well for me. I can have fun without it. I don't need to use, or I'm trying to just cut back. So no thanks right now, or just flat out saying, no, I'm good. You don't even have to give any reasons. If you say no, you say no.
These are such great tips, Ms. Hoblin. Thank you so much for sharing these. And in addition to this, if there's a way for you to sort of plan an exit strategy ahead of time, you with a trusted loved one or adult, that you can have like a key word or a key text or a key phone call that somebody can call you and say that you're needed somewhere else, that gives you a clear plan for escape. And your loved ones and your friends and your family that care about you are happy to get you out of a situation where you're not feeling safe and not feeling comfortable. And so if you can negotiate those kinds of things ahead of time, you have a way, that may not be as confrontational or may not put you on the spot. And it's a way to kind of get you safely out of there, so that you don't have to proceed in any way that you're uncomfortable or anything like that.
Okay, so where do I turn for support? As we mentioned, having a trusted adult in your life is huge and it is super important, but also a trusted friend. And just know that your loved ones care about you and want you to be safe and healthy. So of course, they're going to want to do whatever they need to do to support you, make sure you're okay. Right? Going back to what Jocelyn just mentioned about having an exit strategy, having a plan with an adult that, hey, if I get there and I feel uncomfortable, can you come pick me up? If they're using and I don't want to be in that situation, for the most part, parents are going to say, yeah, I don't want you in that situation either, and I would be happy to come get you out of it. So who are the people, right? Parent, caregiver, guardian, whoever it may be, that trusted adult. But let's say, you don't have a great relationship with your parents. It's okay. There are so many other people that are here for you. Your teachers, and you may not think it, but your principal and your coaches are certainly trusted adults. You may have a good relationship with your friends' parents, and that could be somebody that you can call as well, or an extended family member, aunts and uncles or grandparents. A counselor, right? So it could be your school counselor, or maybe you do have a therapist on your own, and that would be great. That's somebody that you can talk to and confide in. Myself, Ms. Hoglin, I am the Student Assistance Coordinator, so I'm here to talk about any substance-related issues that you may be having, concerns, need for advice. Please come to me. If you're a Ewing High student, or your doctor, right? Your physician, they are there for you to help you with anything related to your physiological health or your mental health. So please speak with them. And as I mentioned, if you do want to get an outside counselor or therapist, or you're thinking you might want to go to a program, call your insurance provider if you have one, if you have medical or health insurance. If you want to ask a parent or guardian to call for you, you just call the number on the back and you tell them what you're looking for, behavioral health services. They can give you the names and lists of providers in your area that do take your insurance and will help cover the payment for it. So that is one way that you're really going to help get the services for yourself. And if you don't have insurance, you can call 211 or the number listed to be referred.
The other great thing is if you're listening, from Mercer County, New Jersey, or viewing from Mercer County, or anywhere in New Jersey, there are various recovery programs as well. And so if you're not sure if treatment is something for you, or if clinical services are something for you, or if you're just interested in talking to somebody about recovery or sort of about substance related challenges, resources like the Mercer Council have recovery support services. There are various support groups in the area. And so I think one of the great things about the field of substance use and recovery today is that there are just so many options and so many resources to utilize. And, we're certainly in a good area and place for that as well.
All right, so let's talk a little bit about denial, right? So for any of you who have been listening and you're saying, listen, Ms. Hoglin, my substance use isn't much of a problem, or Ms. Hoglin, these solutions, they're not going to work for me. I've tried. That's what we call denial, right? So denial is a state where you can deny or distort what's really happening. You might ignore the problem. You might minimize other people's concerns or even blame others for your issues. And in terms of addiction, whether it's to drugs, gambling, anything, denial is a powerful coping mechanism to delay facing the truth. So I want that to really sink in. Denial is a coping mechanism. And what it is you're facing cognitive dissonance. And what that is right, your actions aren't aligned with what your values are, what your beliefs are. So deep down, You probably know, you probably believe, yes, I've heard this 100 times. I know substances are not good for me, but your behaviors say otherwise because you're using. And so that causes cognitive dissonance, and it's actually a form of anxiety. And no one wants to feel anxious about their behaviors and about their thoughts. So what denial does is try to cover up those values or those thoughts that substance use is bad, and you come up with reasons why it's okay that you use. And that's really what denial is. And denial is going to prevent you from getting the help and the treatment that you may need. Denial is going to keep you in this place of being unhealthy and heading down a negative path. So if you are, holding on and you are feeling, some of those quotes, some of that denial, then I encourage you to try to just break through denial with reality. And ways to do that could be journaling about your behaviors, your addictive behaviors as evidence. Maybe you can identify some negative things in your life and connect it with substance use. My grades really aren't great right now. Maybe it's because I've been prioritizing smoking marijuana after school rather than studying and trying to do well on my homework and my tests. If you can start to identify some of these things, it's going to be tough, but it will start to get you to realize that, okay, maybe this is a problem, and inch you a little bit closer to, okay, maybe I should get some help. Maybe I should talk to someone. Maybe I'll try a coping skill and see if I can actually sleep better at night and not use substances instead. Okay, so really trying to break through that denial. Another thing is learning more about addiction and what addiction actually is and the cycle associated, or just getting therapy. Going to see a counselor and going to talk to someone. Sometimes that outside perspective really is helpful. Sometimes you need that tough love to help break through your denial. But it's baby steps, right? Because the hard part is once you recognize that this is an issue, right? The first step, once you recognize that this is an issue, you feel obligated to do something about it. And that's really hard for people. So with the help of a therapist, with a friend, you can start to take baby steps. And even if you're not in this place yet, you can get to this place and you can start to take positive actions. So a therapist can actually be very helpful with that.
And so before we get into various signs and symptoms, I just want to thank you again for being engaged and for viewing this presentation, to empower yourself to learn more and to be more prepared with skills and things to consider and resources if you find yourself in this situation, or if you find a loved one, or a friend, or someone that you care about in this situation. There is a lot of information here that will help you also support others and feel empowered to know what to do in those situations as well. And so some of the signs and symptoms of someone who is having challenges related to use of substances are various changes in behavior. So sometimes it can be moodiness or mood swings, agitation, as you can see in the bottom corner on the other side, paranoia, hyperactivity, anxiety, fidgeting. Those would be some behavior changes. Changes in friend groups, so hanging out with new people, maybe withdrawing from friends that you have grown up with or have spent a lot of time with throughout the years. Finding yourself in trouble, whether it be with the legal system or at school, or in your family structure, or with your friend groups. Losing interest in things that you once enjoyed that really don't create a lot of joy for you anymore, or that have really gone down in terms of your priority because you're focused on other things. Having trouble fulfilling responsibilities, so whether that be at work or at school or in your family of origin. Having academic struggles. There are various physical signs, and these would change depending on what substance is being used, but some of them might be either dilated or constricted pupils, or really bloodshot eyes, significant weight loss or gain. Obviously, there are also some substances, depending on the method of use, that might make marks on the arms or skin. Presence of paraphernalia, and there's a really cool activity that you can go to see different ways and different methods of use for different substances. And some of these, methods of use can look different than what we would traditionally associate with how you might smoke something, or that's an exhibit called Hidden in Plain Sight, and that's eye-opening, for us as youth if we're looking for things, but if we're also trying to help parents understand some of the ways that youth or family or whoever may hide substances and things like that. Having various discord in relationships, trying to hide things from loved ones, having medical or physical health issues, financial challenges, not paying as much attention to physical appearance or hygiene, sleeping more or less than usual, having shakes or tremors, runny nose, watery eyes, nosebleeds. If you smell something that is consistent with substances such as cannabis or alcohol or tobacco, feeling protective over a certain space, trying to isolate things from loved ones, locking bedroom doors, things like that. Keeping, a backpack or a purse close to us that we don't want others to have access to. Making excuses about things, telling stories that don't really make sense, or just flat out lying about something. Appearing to have secrets or being secretive about certain aspects of things. Difficulty focusing or concentrating, either in school or at work, or maybe when someone's talking to you. So these are just some of the signs and symptoms, but sometimes it is tricky because these also could be signs and symptoms of other things, just the transition from being a kid into adolescence into adulthood, hormones and things like that. Or some of these things might also be symptoms of something else, such as a mental health related challenge, or that someone has experienced trauma, someone's going through some sort of adjustment, or having hardship in their relationships. And so I think the important thing here is, if you are noticing some of these things, no, it might not be directly related to somebody having a substance related challenge, but it may be a sign that someone is struggling with something, and it may be just a good opportunity for us to check in on someone. And yourself, and your loved ones and your friends, and so if you notice that it seems like they're acting different or behaving differently, it might just be a good opportunity to check in on
them. Okay, so if you are worried about a friend or a loved one, here are some things that you can do. Just a couple little tips to help you out. Most importantly, keep calm, right? So let's not approach them with anger or with blame. When we do that, we're likely going to be met with resistance, again, with denial. So none of those things will really be helpful. We just want to have a nice, calm conversation. And I think it's most important that you just convey the message that you want to be supportive, that you care and you're genuinely concerned. Again, the whole reason for confronting someone, the whole reason for even this presentation is not to point fingers, it's not to blame, it's not to force people into acting or being a certain way. It's really because we care, because we want the best for people, and we have seen firsthand, or we have seen movies or shows of how this ends really badly, okay? And we just want the best for the person. One way to do that is to keep using iMessages. iMessages is where you're pretty much just speaking from your own perspective and speaking about yourself. You're using I statements rather than you statements. I feel, I feel scared related to your substance use because I'm afraid that I'm going to lose a friend. So that's how you're going to keep it on yourself rather than using you statements and blaming the other person. They're just likely to get defensive. Of course, have these conversations when they are not under the influence. When they are, it's likely that they will, react poorly, or they may not even remember the conversation just in general. And for your own self, be sure that you're not just talking, but you're also listening. We really want to listen to whatever issue is going on, and they need to know that they are heard and you are here to help them, right? That goes back to those underlying causes. what's really going on and how can I help you resolve that? Be consistent with your views and this conversation. Don't send mixed messages, and set boundaries and define consequences. So if a friend is using or a loved one that you really do not agree with, you can set a boundary there and say, listen, I love you and I care about you, but I will not hang out with you or engage with you when you're under the influence. And again, this is where it becomes important to stay consistent with that, so that they know the consequences and that they learn. So this is how to not have that enabling type of behavior.
And so something that's really important to cover is signs and symptoms of a substance-related overdose, just because unfortunately overdose is very prevalent. With opioids and things like fentanyl being put in opioids in other substances, even including marijuana and cocaine and other stimulants. Unfortunately, fentanyl is very potent and is very likely to cause overdose because it is so much cheaper. It's finding its way into various substances, and people who might not even know that they're using something that could cause them to overdose, they might think, oh, I'm just having marijuana or something like that. And then before they know it, them or their friend or loved one is in a situation, where they have overdosed. And so there are some clear signs of overdose. If the person is unresponsive, if they're not able to be roused by either speaking to them loudly, there's something called a sternal rub where you can take your fist and kind of rub it on their chest to see if they rouse. Slow or non-existent breathing, you can check to see if someone is breathing. Often they will have skin that looks bluish or grayish, and their nails and lips will also look bluish and grayish, and they can be cold to the touch as well as clammy. Sometimes you can hear a gurgling sound if someone has overdosed, or something that sounds like a snore. Pupils may look very tiny, and the person, again, cannot be woken up. And so I think it's very important to call 911 immediately in this situation, because there are immediate things that first responders on the phone can direct you to do to increase the likelihood that this person is going to survive the overdose. Something else that's important is that all of us have the ability to save someone's life. I think it's so important for us to promote here getting trained in the use of Narcan. Narcan is an opioid overdose antidote that you can, it comes in a few forms. So it comes in an injectable form, but the most commonly used for people who get training is a nasal spray. And at this training, not only you get trained in how to utilize Narcan, but you are often provided with a free kit that you can take with you, that you can use at any time. And you don't have to be a medical professional or anyone specific to be able to get trained and to utilize Narcan. And so by carrying Narcan, you can very quite literally save someone's life, out in the community, somebody in your family, somebody at school, a friend. And then something else I think that's really important to highlight here is that there may be reasons that make people scared to get help, right? To call 911. If you're underage, if you're worried about something illegal that has happened, and now your friend or your family member is in a bad situation. New Jersey does have the Good Samaritan law, which offers protection for people who are seeking help for people who have suspected to have overdosed from substances. And so don't think twice, call 911 and you can save a life. And that's very, very important, because in a lot of these situations, overdose is the difference between life and death. And so if you can't carry Narcan or haven't been trained, definitely place that call to 911 so that we can get our loved ones help.
And I just want to highlight too that, which also was mentioning earlier about fentanyl, it really is a huge issue. This has become a lot more prevalent, where fentanyl and other drugs are being mixed in, and you would have absolutely no idea. Such a tiny, tiny amount of fentanyl is lethal. It is way stronger than heroin is. And again, it can be mixed into marijuana and virtually anything. You just have no idea. So obviously it's best to just stay away from anything, but be very aware of overdose. And if it's a situation where a few people are using and somebody looks like they're really struggling, do not be afraid to call 911. Saving somebody's life is way more important than, you guys being around or being afraid that you're going to get in trouble. You really need to call and get the medical help that you need.
Yeah, and Miss Hoglund and I sort of chose to focus on the kind of overdose in this situation that might result from an opioid or fentanyl. But when we think of like alcohol poisoning or blacking out from alcohol, that is no less dangerous. And so, sometimes we have this myth or perception that if our friend has used alcohol, they just need to sleep it off, or, but that could really be very dangerous and somebody could really be having a hard time. And so the idea here is not just in a situation where you think someone has overdosed, from an illegal substance, but if you think somebody has used marijuana and might be overdosed, it could be mixed with something. But if somebody is exhibiting signs of blacking out or not being responsive after using alcohol, it would be just as important in that situation to make sure that they get help as well. So just being mindful of that too.
And additionally,
so I know
there is a higher risk of overdosing when you're taking multiple substances, right? So if you know that somebody is mixing pills and alcohol, they are at a high risk of overdosing. Alcohol is already a depressant, and some of these medications are also depressants, and it could just stop your heart immediately. So be very aware. Take care of your friends. Take care of yourself.
Yeah, absolutely. And so we have a third question here to test your knowledge, which is: scientists have discovered that vaping nicotine exposes people to which of the following chemical compounds? A, formaldehyde, a gas that has been linked to cancer. B, acrylamide, a chemical used to treat wastewater, including sewage. And I'm going to do my best here, but crotonaldehyde, a poisonous and highly flammable liquid with a suffocating odor. I don't know about you, they're hard to say. They don't sound like good chemicals that you would want to be putting in your body, but I'll give you a second to see which you think the answer is. And the answer is actually D, all of the above. Something that I found very interesting, NIDA did a study a few years back where they asked middle school students what was actually in the vaping liquid. And the answers were sort of all over the map. A very large portion of the students, said that they didn't know, or said that they thought that it was just flavored water. And so they weren't actually sure, but relatively few realized just how many chemicals were in a vape juice or liquid. And some of them didn't even know that there was anything addictive in it. Nicotine is in this vape liquid in various levels, which can lead to addiction as well. Nicotine is the addictive substance in vape juice. So that's just something to consider, as well as additional harmful chemicals that are in that product as well. All right, so moving on to effective treatments. I think one of the best things about sort of where we are in this field today is that we have so much research and support for so many different pathways to recovery, that this is no longer a one-size-fits-all process. There are so many resources in communities. There are nonprofits and grant funding to assist people in seeking services. There are hotline numbers. There are just so many places to turn. There's a huge recovery movement right now where people who have lived experience with substance-related challenges who are now in recovery can assist people through the recovery process so that they don't feel so alone. It's someone that they can relate to, that provides hope and support and various options for the way that they have entered recovery. And so some of the effective ways that people can access recovery are through, like Ms. Hoglund said, treatment and counseling, through withdrawal management, which was formerly known as detox, various programs where you can actually stay for a while, inpatient, partial care programs, which are for a portion of the day with some flexibility to go home or elsewhere in between. Intensive outpatient, which is sometimes between 2 and 3 evenings a week, to traditional outpatient, where you meet with a counselor maybe once a week, and maybe can step down to every other week, a few times a month. There are places that support recovery housing, that you can be with other people who are going through similar experiences. There's also various medications now that can support and facilitate recovery. Some of those include methadone, Suboxone, Subutex, Vivitrol. And so, these medications would be similar to how insulin might work with diabetes or something like that. We know that addiction is a brain disease, and so like there are medical options for heart disease or other things like that. There is also these options for substance use disorder treatment and recovery. There are also various harm reduction strategies, which are so important. There are harm reduction centers in several communities throughout New Jersey. And I think it's so important that we're acknowledging that we need to meet people where they are. So we might not always be talking with people who haven't started using substances or who are newly involved with using substances. We may be engaging with people who are further along, the addictive process and may have a harder time stopping. And so there are resources that we can connect with to reduce the incidences of medical complications, such as disease transmission by providing clean syringes, by providing, access to just healthcare, and things like that, and other needed resources. And there are also so many different support groups and programs that people can access without ever having to do any formal treatment, such as Alcoholics Anonymous or Narcotics Anonymous. There are also support programs for family members in each of those categories. There's Smart Recovery, Celebrate Recovery, there's All Recovery meetings. They also now have MARA meetings, which are medication assisted recovery meetings. And so the possibilities out there are endless of what you can do, and there are various ways that you can access these services, and we'll provide some resources for those. Unfortunately, relapse is part of the recovery process, and there may take a couple tries, but the good thing is that we're meeting people where they're at, and there's no shame in saying, I slipped up, or, this option that I tried didn't really work for me. Can we reevaluate and redo a needs assessment and see sort of where I'm at and what else might be helpful and supportive as I am, trying to get on the path to recovery. And this is a slide that's really, really important to me. I truly think that each of us have a responsibility to end stigma and to show that we are here to support people, that people are not their addiction, that an addiction doesn't make someone a bad person, or or someone that is not deserving of our support and of recovery. And there are things that we can do to remind people of their humanity and of their worth and of their value, and that we are not going to sort of abandon them no matter what they're involved in. And so unfortunately, historically, there have been a lot of harmful terms that we've used to talk about people, and even to people who are having substance related challenges. And I don't like to share them, but you can see them over here with the thumbs down. And when we use this language, we send the message that somebody is, if we're saying the word clean, we're sending the message that somebody who's using substances is dirty. If we're using the term addict, we are reducing a person who is a person first to something that is part of a behavior that they engage in. But that person is so much more than just their substance use. They might be a father, a friend, a loved one, a grandparent, a sibling. That person is someone's loved one, right? And so we want to use language that shows that we are in support of this person, that we're here for them. We want to create a safe space where they can convey to us that they're struggling with something. and we want to be a safe person that somebody can go to if they need help. And so the idea here is to use person first language that recognizes the humanity in each of us before we label people, with things that stigmatize them. We want to say substance related challenges or someone with a substance use disorder. We want to say the word, recovery instead of like clean or dirty. And all of these things have implications in the real world of how people who have substance related challenges continue to face stigma, which makes it difficult to access care, to get support, and to enter recovery. And so I think while we have come a long way, there still are a lot of steps that we can take. And it starts with each of us sometimes just making little changes in the language that we use. And last but not least, we just have some resources, which I'll leave up here for a while. If this was in person like it was intended to be, we would have the ability to click on all of these links, but we will share these maybe in the info section of our YouTube video, but you can Google any of this terminology and find the resources that you're looking for. And hopefully this can help you either learn more information about substance related challenges, different resources that you can turn to if you're seeking support, and different resources that are available in your direct communities that you can access. And so I hope that these resources will provide some support and assistance for you. And I also hope that you gained something from this presentation. I know it was a pleasure working with Ms. Hogland on this. And I hope that you benefited from it and can utilize us at any time if you have further questions that we weren't able to answer, obviously through this format, but we are available. You can see our contact information here. And I just want to say thank you to Ms. Hogland for being my co-host for this presentation. And, thanks to each of you who took the time to view it.
Yes, thank you, Jocelyn, and thank you everyone for being here. I truly appreciate it. I really hope everyone got at least a little something out of our message today. Just a little bit is all we really ask. And if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to reach out to us. Thank you again.